If you come to Fredericksburg, Texas, you can go to jail.
Right down the road from Stonewall, Texas, where we are hosting at the LBJ State Park, is Fredericksburg. And we just spent a great Saturday afternoon exploring the history of this German founded town.
Most people nowadays know Fredericksburg for its abundance of wineries and its cute downtown shopping district, which are all nice. However, if you know us, we really like history. And so we really implore that you take some time and actually visit some of the historical things here in Fredericksburg that we experienced today so that you get to appreciate and better understand how this city came to be and, what its founding fathers, really did to make this a home.
One of the things I like about Fredericksburg is even when you're shopping downtown, a lot of the stores are in historic buildings. There's quite a few of the original buildings still here. And it's just take a minute to step back and look at the outside of these shops instead of just the inside because you're going to see some great architecture. But there is an entire section up towards one end of town, basically, where they have the Pioneer Museum and they have the historic buildings of a village, just all kinds of things to explore there.
One of the best ways to experience the history and culture of Fredericksburg is to visit on the first Saturday of the month. On those days, the Pioneer Museum, the Veriens Kirche, and the Old County Jail are all open to go in and tour. So for one admission price, it was like $12 a person for adults. You can visit all three establishments. And especially on that first Saturday, there are people in interpretive clothing at the Pioneer Museum demonstrating, different tools of the trade and what life might have been like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And you can see them making butter, showing off, again, different tools, equipment, guns. The blacksmith shop was open today when we were visiting. And so that was a really nice way to learn some history and really appreciate the culture and the buildings of Fredericksburg.
The Pioneer Village, I guess I would call it. It's kind of it's an own enclosed area. There's Sunday houses there. There's cabins that were there, like you mentioned. The blacksmith shop is all set up and operating. There's an old school that's set up there. There's just a really good glimpse of some buildings that have been moved into that spot, so that you could see what those buildings were like, how they were used, and there's a couple of things. They do a really good job with the signs that kind of explain what the buildings were used for. But I thought what was really nice was in the houses and some of the stores and things that are there, there's recordings as you walk in. They're motion activated and the recordings will start. And on a number of them, the people who did the recordings are descendants. So I know like one of the houses, one guy starts talking, he's like, my great grandfather built this house. And so I just thought that was really neat that they were able to find people and family members to be able to do those recordings.
You mentioned that they brought a lot of the buildings into that area, but there is one building on the grounds that is in its original location, and that's the Kamla house. And it started off as a residence, and the original Kamla family turned it into, well, they built onto the house and they turned the front half into like a little mini general store with food and then ladies clothing accessories. And so they sold those goods out of the front of the house, and then they lived in the back half of the house, which they had built on. And it's a good sort of demonstration of how they were living here at that time and providing for themselves. And you get to see the cool different how the masonry, I guess, changed over the years from the different types of structures. So there was you had like the logs with the mortar in between, and then you had like the open frame houses, and then you had the wood houses. So they used different building materials, and especially in some of those where they added on, you can see how that changed over the years.
Well, and then they started using the limestone from this area, and a number of buildings in town still are made. The older ones were made with what they refer to as the field stones, the limestones, and then you get the ones that are obviously they've been quarried, and so they're much cleaner.
Right, which is sort of an example of what we're standing, behind us as an example of that.
Yeah, and so you can kind of see that transition as it happens as well. A few blocks away from that Pioneer Village area is the county jail, and it is the fourth county jail building that they built. And I guess they had problems with the first three and decided finally they would make an investment and build a building that would last. And since this county jail was built in 1885, I think they succeeded. It's pretty sturdy.
Yeah. Well, I think the first three were one burned down, one fell apart. They were wooden structures, so maybe not quite as sturdy as this brick one. But yeah, it's crazy. They actually just reopened it in the last year. When it was decommissioned in 1949, I believe they said was the last time it was used as an
39, I think.
39?
Yeah, 1939.
Okay, so quite a long time ago. And a new jail had been built in town. It was essentially just turned over to the county, and they were using it for storage. And for years and years and years and years and decades, it was just used for storage. And they finally decided that they should maybe, turn it back into a tourist attraction, essentially, because it is in such good shape. Now, they said it was not great shape, but it's also from 1885. So what is really cool about it now is it's a two-story structure that still has like the metal jail cells inside. So it's a brick structure on the inside. The first floor had an intake section, and then the living quarters for the jail keeper, which
the jailer.
The
I think
jailer.
that's what they're known as. Yeah.
Right, but what they said was he was not a law enforcement person. He was literally just the guy that oversaw the jail and lived there with his family, and him and his wife were responsible for feeding the inmates. But he wasn't a law enforcement officer, and he had no really ability to do anything. And so then upstairs was the actual jail cells, and there's two different sections to that, which we found fascinating. There's the minimum security jail cells, which had windows to the outside. And then there was the maximum security jail cells, which, if you think of a big brick upper, building, inside of that is a metal frame box. And the inmates were housed inside that metal frame box jail cell with an open walkway around the outside. And that was essentially to prevent them from trying to escape out the windows, because they were in the center of the building instead of on the outsides of the building. And just seeing that was a really interesting concept of how they constructed and designed that.
The Old County Jail is kind of a testament to how things have changed in Fredericksburg. It does have a rock wall around it, but as you look over that rock wall, you're seeing a lot of buildings. Well, at the time when they built it in 1885, it was all by itself on that city block. It was the only thing on the block. It was across the street from the county courthouse at the time. So now the city is built up around it, but it's neat that it's still there.
Just like any old town or village from that time period. I mean, the houses and the buildings were few and far between, not what we think of today. And so it is crazy to see how much this area has built up. When you're looking out the back door of the jail and into what was the stables and that rock wall that you said, that used to be the stables. But they also had an additional layer of protection. And so they had embedded glass shards into the top of that rock wall around the outside. And there's a small remnant of it left now. Obviously, when they decommissioned it, they decided that maybe that wasn't the safest thing for the neighborhood, knowing that residences were going to move up around it. So they took all the glass out and sort of plastered over it, but they left one section to show you what it looked like. Another real indication of progress and things building up is the third stop that we made, which is the Veriens Kirche, which means society church. And that was one of the first structures that was built here in Fredericksburg back in 1847, I believe, was the cornerstone sign. And it was this octagonal building in the middle of town that they used for, as it says, it means society church. And a number of different churches and school groups and other associations congregated there. That was sort of the meeting house in the center of town. And unfortunately, it was only around for about 50 years. And then when the city of Fredericksburg celebrated its 50th anniversary, by then the building had kind of fallen into disarray, and they ended up tearing it down. One of two reasons: instead, because it was falling into disrepair, but also because at that point in time, it was literally the center of town, and the main street came up to it, it went around it, and then it came back together and went out of town. Well, they decided that they wanted to straighten Main Street, and it was becoming a metropolitan area. I don't know what you'd call that in the in like 1930, whatever it was, like 1800s. But anyways, they wanted to do that. So they demolished it and then reconstructed the town, and buildings went up and more people moved to town. And then in 1934, the residents decided that they wanted to reconstruct it as sort of a memorial to the original settlers and the founders. And so they reconstructed the building. They moved it kind of off of Main Street, and now it's in like Market Plots, which is a community open area garden kind of gathering center what they use for festivals and all sorts of things. But today you can go in the building, and it's a memorial and a little museum with a lot of history and artifacts of those original immigrants to this area.
Fredericksburg is a great little town, and if you get a chance, you should explore it, whether it's to come on and do the shopping, have a good glass of wine somewhere. There's a ton of good restaurants in this town as well that we seem to be working our way through slowly.
Also the German restaurants. I mean, because
Well,
it's
and
a
they're-
German town, so there's like a lot of good German restaurants and bakeries here.
And it's Texas, so there's a lot of barbecue as well. That seems to be the two main food sources here is German and barbecue. Also in Fredericksburg is the National Museum of the Pacific War. And the last time we were here, we went and toured that. So I'll post a link to that video. There's a ton of stuff in there to see. So it's a really nice place to learn about things and enjoy. I mentioned going downtown and checking out the buildings while you're shopping. A lot of them, the original buildings, have historic commission signs and informational signs that tell you about what happened in that building, when it was built, how it's been used over the years. I don't know. I'm a big history buff, so I love that kind of stuff. But
Well, and it never fails that you will run into somebody here in town whose ancestors founded something, worked on something, did this, was the barber. Everybody's connected because it just goes back so deep in generational roots. And so I always find it fascinating. You just have to start talking to the folks here that work and volunteer here, and they'll tell you all about the area.
so get to Fredericksburg, talk to the locals, enjoy the food and the history. And in the meantime, keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there.
Not far down the road from where we are park hosting at LBJ State Park is Fredericksburg, Texas. Don't know what was I doing.
We just spent a Saturday
Yeah.
afternoon.
Okay, try that again.
I'm like, whoa, wait. I mean, I
I'm gonna
said,
make the intro
I said
short.
short. I didn't
I'll try that
couldn't be
again.
that short. The Veriens Kirche and the Old County Jail are all open. They're having choir practice.